and millions and millions of dollars were raised for literally nothing. And I think that's where, again, it's a public perception matter of identifying the difference between an ICO and an STO, and how we're kind of adapting as a society, and each country has their own kind of regulatory response to STOs. I think that's going to be something we have to realize going forward as well.
Sure, I want to sort of reflect back on the last 4 or 5 years that I've been involved in. Just flash back to COP21, when I think maybe the first side event in the COP series, Owen and I were on a panel on next-gen standards and governance and digital solutions and how those could help achieve the Paris Agreement. And indeed, the report that Stephanie held up came out following that event. And it took about a year or so to come up with that report. And we're on second report's taking a year or so, but it's taking this long, 4 or 5 years, to address the non-technical aspects of blockchain. It's not just blockchain as a technology, it's blockchain as a movement and democratizing the ability of everyone to participate into at the micro level and finance, make personal decisions. And I think I mentioned earlier on, there's 1,000 plus blockchain for good initiatives right now. And we've all heard the expression, well, there's an app for that. Pretty soon there'll be, well, there's a token for that. And we'll all have personal ledgers, much like we have super computers in our pockets right now that allow us to do everything. And that's not going to take too long before that happens. Well, can that happen in a way that's as smooth and facilitative as possible to the technology and applications development, i.e. the governance and framework systems, looking at blockchain similar to the early days of the internet, and putting in place a holistic, like the terms that Owen was using, system, framework that facilitates how these tokens talk to one another to ensure we have the sustainability, integrity in terms of carbon budgets and so on. Otherwise, what we're talking about isn't going to have a proof of reality, right, that we want to see, your proof of work and proof of stake and proof of authority and so on. And so, in looking at these digital technologies, I think one of the really big challenges, again, non-technical, is how do we bring these together and enable transformational change at that level for the transformational change we want to see in the real economy and in the world more rapidly, cost effectively, to address the scale and urgency demands to achieve the SDGs in the Paris Agreement. So I think all of what you're talking about is going to need this fundamental underlying foundation. Otherwise, the public perception and all of these other soft issues aren't going to be resolved at the speed that we need to see them resolved, as I was mentioning with these reports, and it can't take us 10 years, it needs to be much quicker.
I just want to reflect a bit more on the non-technical issues that are related to blockchain that we are trying to figure out. So I mentioned a meta registry system that we are designing for the purpose of recording and tracking climate assets in the context of bilateral cooperation among countries. And one of the features of a distributed database and blockchain that appeals to us is the immutability of the data. So in terms of planning this meta registry type of system, we think that blockchain is really appealing. But at the same time, and perhaps it's just because I work for a large organization, using such a distributed database system raises a host of new issues in the legal space that are sort of yet to be resolved, and we're still trying to think through. So for example, security of data across jurisdictions, privacy. The EU has privacy regulations that other jurisdictions don't have. Other issues related to transactions across jurisdictions and taxes, whose law applies. We are also looking at governance for the decentralized system. So what are the roles of different countries when they collaborate to share data and record that data in a decentralized system? So just wanted to reflect that even if the technical piece is rather simple in terms of what we're looking for, a distributed database, and we understand that there are already great market options for the technical component, some of the soft issues, really are the pieces that can hold up project planning and make new concepts harder to implement.
Yeah, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Do you guys want to say any closing statements, or should we go straight to questions? Questions. Okay, this is great. We have standing room only. Does anyone have a question for any of our panelists, or more broadly, general, what is blockchain? Don't be shy. You're all experts, okay. Oh, okay, perfect.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to have a general question to anyone. You know, like you were discussing all the potential use cases, and of course we were mentioning in particular renewable energy and then mangroves. One question I have is, of course, like the projects themselves, they have different IRR profiles. How you know, are you managing that? Because like the appetite for investment, whether it's family offices or like I think we should go also to smaller tickets. Actually, like the long-term potential of blockchain is actually to provide tokens that you can buy for fractions of what you were mentioning, no? But how that dimension of the different profitability of projects is affecting your work?
Well, we only invest into renewable energy, so it's fairly straightforward. As an investment fund, our IRR is usually high teens, and our projects that we also tokenize are about the same, so it's very straightforward for us. I'm not sure for the other impact stuff. I think maybe you'd be better.
It's really project specific and what you're looking for as an investor. Obviously, you know, if you're investing into sort of mangroves and reforestation and preventing deforestation and you know, those sort of projects, you're looking more at philanthropic venture returns, you know, and so it's more important about how do you report and how do you can report back to your stakeholders. And it's a whole package of information. When you're talking about renewable energy assets such as wind power, solar, there's a standard return you expect, you know, and then you adjust that for the markets they're in. So if they're in India as opposed to the Pacific, or if they're in the US, it's different. So it's hard to say this is the return we expect, you know. I mean, it doesn't veer away from the standard returns you expect of these typical sorts of assets. What we try to do is through equity investment, release the capital early, or through debt investment, refinance more expensive capital into cheaper capital, or provide greenfield funding earlier without going through the onerous banking process. So we're just optimising what's already there and creating some efficiencies, but those sort of standard returns and processes are still there. Sorry.
Just one comment. I mean, my point was that the blockchain technology should actually make bankable projects that are today are not bankable. No, so it should make projects that today are not accessing financeable.
Yeah, so blockchain allows democratization, you know. So, you know, with more projects being available on a blockchain type of platform, it means smaller ticket sizes of projects are available for investors to participate in. And depending on where they're marketed, the type of investors can come in. So in certain markets, you know, a normal consumer can put in $1,000, you know, $500. In other markets, they can only put minimum 50 or 20, you know. So it depends on what the project's trying to fundraise for and what markets they're trying to fundraise in. But there are already crowdfunding platforms. They're already doing this for community-based solar projects, for example. You know, so for smaller ticket sizes, the technology is already there. So what we're talking about in terms of blockchain and moving it more towards accelerating climate finance is how then we can aggregate some of these smaller ticket sizes into a bundle so that more money can flow in to release capital to further projects.
Yeah, maybe just on less on the finance side and more on the cost side. So we're a standard setter, and in the carbon markets, if we change a requirement in a methodology, it can cost project developers quite a lot of money to implement that. And it's always in the back of our minds that we want increased credibility and transparency and integrity, but that, it's really free. And so part of the mission of CLI and the Next Generation MRV program is to test use cases to, I like the word optimize actually, I think that's really a really good way of looking at it, to see what we can introduce that at least doesn't increase the costs and can enable the use of technology. And if you take something like, we kind of talked about mangroves and things like reforestation, that's not that easy to do because there's at least 3 technologies that we could just reel off, remote sensing, radar, and drone visual inspection, which could all do the job at various scales of inspecting a site. So how do you write a standard that can deal with all of that? And how can you write a methodology that can standardize that if what we're actually after is standardization and smaller tokens? Then it's quite difficult to do. So part of what we're trying to achieve here is to have a version of a methodology that can be digital alongside the version of a methodology that's analog, is not the right word, but and have those two run side by side and still standardized. So there's a lot of work going on to think about how we provide addendums to methodologies that can enable the digital version without killing off those that don't yet have the capacity to make that leap, or maybe operating in a country where that leap's just not possible. So there's not an answer in there other than to say part of that program is to try and optimize on the cost side as well as the transaction side.
Thank you. Some of you shared that this whole thing on blockchain is going to democratize finance, and there'll be many small ticket investments. I could just put in $1,000 or maybe $20 depending on the sector. But my worry and my question connected with that is, if you're democratizing finance a lot and anybody could get access to put in small ticket sizes, and these are tradable, the tokens can be tradable as well, right? So today I buy something, I don't like it, I sell that and buy something else tomorrow. So would this remove the entire focus on impact that would ideally be coming from investors? Because today if I'm a traditional investor, I put in say $1 million and I ensure that the project is sustainable. I push for sustainable practices in that project. But if I'm a small ticket investor, if I don't like the project, I just move. And how would that happen where as an investor I still focus on impact? How would I push, say, the borrower to live up to what he claims to be sustainable? How would that happen in this new scheme of things that you are explaining?
I could talk a little bit to that. Our platform only chooses impact investments, and we have a positive screening process. Obviously, we will then inbuild some of the data in terms of, associated with those specific projects. And so when an investor chooses a project to invest in, they have all those stats and numbers, and it's no different. When you buy shares on a stock exchange, you could buy with a couple $100, and you could choose, you could buy and sell out of it. And how do you assess what you're buying is what fits your philosophy, investment philosophy. So you still have to do that same amount of research, but what the platform allows you to do is have sort of a consumer-facing snapshot where, okay, this is a solar project, this is what they're planning to do. This is a mangrove project, this is how much carbon, sequestration they're claiming to do, and this is the verification and all that. So that's what the sort of blockchain and associated technologies allow you as a consumer to be able to see all that in a sort of one interface that makes it look a lot clearer and easier rather than having to trawl through prospectuses and all those sort of things.
Satisfied with that response?
I could understand what the platform does, but there could be some projects that could escape, right? See, as an investor, I might not be really worried about impact, but this project is giving me good returns, I just invest. So how can we prevent those cases? So does it mean that anybody listing on your platform is put through a screen and only then do their list, or?
There are heaps of platforms out there. You don't have to go through our platform, you can go through any platform. So you as a consumer have that choice. We don't force you to invest in any particular projects. All we say is, here's a variety of projects that we've pre-screened under these criteria, and these are the metrics, and this is the data that we can provide you. You then make that choice, and you can switch between platforms and things like that. So that's how you have control over what type of investments you make and what type of returns or impact that you expect to see.
Yeah, I think to that point, all of the platforms I'm familiar with, including ours and yours, as an investor, you're given the asset up front. You're told, okay, this is the asset on promotion to invest into, or this is the bundle of assets you can invest into. You don't toss money at a fund, for example, and then we allocate your money as we choose. But it's entirely transparent. I mean, the beauty of the blockchain is that it is very transparent. It's very traceable. As a public consumer who's investing their money, you're receiving regular feedback, regular kind of portfolio reviews and analysis. So it'd be very difficult for us to deviate from that mandate without you being notified. I mean, if we decided suddenly we wanted to put your money into, I don't know, a coal plant, I mean, it would be unethical, but it also, we would have to notify you if we were going to do that. So it would be, I think for most of these funds that are rising now, that are investing via tokens into assets, doing renewable or carbon mitigation or abatement, I mean, it's all public, right? So as an investor, you make that decision up front. I don't know, I'm not familiar with any platforms that would just take your money and donate it to an asset of their choice. So I mean, I don't think any of us would be speaking along those. Pardon? For what? For an investor.
If you're a US investor, at the moment the regulations say that you've got a 1 year lockup period. So if you buy into an STO, you can't sell it within that 1 year. After that 1 year, you've got liquidity options. In other markets, you have instant liquidity. Now, the issue is, once you go into an STO, you've made that initial investment, then how do you then trade it out? So a lot of these STOs are then listed on trading platforms. So at the moment, most people will use T0 or what's the other one in the US? I've forgotten. Anyway, and the largest one that's going to come online, or probably is online, and it will be the largest market, it will be 6 in Switzerland. So you've got a secondary market. So similar to a stock exchange, you can then trade your tokens on these exchanges as long as the STOs list them on those exchanges. So when you invest into a token, you also need to consider, well, where do you want to trade? Because the more platforms they're registered with, the more liquidity you can access.
Yeah, and Chow, you were also talking before about how some of these deals may not be public. Some of them may just be to increase liquidity amongst LPs in a certain position, and therefore they're not open to being listed on an exchange. It would just be amongst the other LPs in a specific deal.
Yeah.
So there's varying levels of the liquidity around some of these assets.
And that depends on the regulations in which the assets, where the asset sits, or where it's been listed, or where So each investment has to be considered in its own rights in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So if you're more after liquidity, then you want to choose obviously platforms and assets that will allow you to have that. Oh, sorry. The big one is open finance. That's only in the US.
I'm just keeping track of time, and I know we're a few minutes over time already, and I think there's just a short period for changeover. So unfortunately, we've run out of time to be able to have some wrap-up summaries from each of the panelists. So I just invite everyone to thank our panelists today, and thank you all for joining us this week.
security